WKXX is live for the fastest 2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson.
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
And Gerhard Mathangani.
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Welcome in on this Thursday edition of WKXX Live. And it just so happens to be high school football opening day across the state of Alabama. Got to be excited about that. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani in studio with you today. And busy show today. You can listen, of course, on Fox Sports 102.9. We are also on WKXX.com and on YouTube Live. So go on to YouTube, search for WKXX Live, or go to our Facebook or Twitter page, and a link to that YouTube video should be up there for you to check out. But you can watch us there with our live stream there on YouTube Live. Just search for WKXX Live. All of our guests appear on the All-American HVAC Service Hotline. Ron Blaskovitz from the Sand Mountain Reporter will join us at 2:15. Talk a little high school football. Jason Collins from the Night of Fire drag race you've been hearing about. He'll talk with us at 2:45. And Glenn Gilbo of Outkick.com covers LSU and the Saints. He will join us coming up at 3 o'clock. So busy show today, Gerhard, but I mean, it's fall sports time. A lot of talk about high school football, of course, but you got volleyball starting, you got cross country starting. So life gets busy starting today, really, in high school sports.
We could officially say happy game day, and it'd be a regular season game. I know there's some jamborees going on this week over the course of the next 2 days, but we'll focus obviously on the games that count, all the games that do count today. Just start to whet your palate for the year to come. And about half the teams around the state will play between today and tomorrow, and then everybody ostensibly gets on their way coming up on Thursday and Friday. But you mentioned it. It's a part of a bigger thing when it comes to fall sports in general, especially on the high school level. You have volleyball, you have cross country. On the college level, you also have soccer. That's when they play their spring sport, or they play their fall season. We also have golf coming up in the fall season as well. Some baseball exhibitions, softball exhibitions as well. So, I mean, we're getting into that really fun time of year. October's always been my favorite, but I always love the lead up going into it, late August and all of September.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I know a lot of folks will be heading out to games tonight, so we'll get you ready for those high school football games that are happening tonight and tomorrow night here in week 0 of the high school football season. So we are excited about that. Again, we'll kind of get into the teams up on Sand Mountain with Ron Blaskovitz from the Sand Mountain Reporter coming up at 2:15. And but a lot going on. Again, it's opening day for high school football. We're 10 days out from Jacksonville State kicking off against Stephen F. Austin down in Montgomery for the college football season. And baseball, of course, going on. We'll get to the Braves in just a minute. But I want to start with some college football. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the Big Ten,
right?
Of course, expansion mode, but they were putting together their new media rights deal, and they have struck a massive deal with not one, not two, but 3 networks in Fox, CBS, and NBC.
They've always been ahead of the curve as far as being able to see, hey, we can exploit this TV space, and they did so, and Commissioner Mike Slive of the SEC essentially took that model and helped create the formation of the SEC network that we know now. The SEC has obviously done a lot of good work as far as negotiating their own TV deals. But let's not forget who the pioneer was on this. It was the Big Ten, and they've only taken that a step further with this newest TV rights package with Fox, CBS, and NBC. We'll get into the details and the money in a bit, but life will be good if you're a member of the Big Ten Conference. If you're a commissioner in that conference, if you're not a commissioner of the conference, he's sitting great, obviously, striking all these deals. But if you are an AD and a president and you know what's about to come from your athletic departments, it's about to be a really good time to be a Big Ten member.
Yes, it sure is. The deal is 7 years, $7 billion is the deal that the Big Ten has struck.
$7 billion. I mean, it's insane when you think about it. And this is just in television money. This is before one ticket is punched. This is before one jersey is sold. This is before any of that. A $7 billion package. I mean, it's insane to see how far media rights have gone. But when you add in the teams that the Big Ten has added in with the 2 teams out in California, it made them kind of the pretty girl in the room, so to speak. It made them just the conference that you wanted to be a part of, and they got 3 networks to do it.
Yeah, this deal begins July 1st, 2023. So next year, they will have it. And the way it's going, and I think this is kind of cool how they're doing it, is I thought Fox would probably be like they're going to get the best game every week.
Right.
But that's not the case.
Yeah.
Fox, CBS, NBC, they're all going to it's going to be like a draft of them getting to pick games. It's not one network getting the top game. And then when it comes to the championship game, that thing's rotating. It's not going to be on Fox every year or NBC every year. It's going to rotate through. Now, Fox, I think, will get more than the other networks in the 7 years, but it's going to rotate each year, which I think is a really good idea.
I think it was really good in negotiations to give CBS some love, to give NBC some love as far as the marquee games are concerned. The reason why part of the negotiations went sour between the SEC and CBS was that they weren't necessarily going to always get the best games and the marquee games. And, of course, the money came into play as well. But the fact that CBS could still hang their hat on, we have all this other programming, and we will still every now and again get the best game of the Big Ten, whether it's week to week or the big game at the end of the year and the Big Ten championship game year to year.
Yeah.
They could still, stomach that and then be able to negotiate their own deals that way. I think with the way the Big Ten went through this is saying, hey, we're not going to let one network be the power player here. We'll let them all, eat from the same trough, so to speak. And as you mentioned, I think Fox will be able to, I guess, get the most big games. If there was a percentage of the pie that goes 51, 52, 53%, it'll be Fox.
CBS, again, this starts in 2023.
Right.
And CBS will still have the SEC in 2023.
Right.
So CBS is going to get 7 Big Ten games in 2023 because they will also be having SEC each week. I'm wondering what the priority will be as far as broadcast when they have these days where there's going to be 2 games in SEC and a Big Ten.
Right.
Are you going to kind of push SEC to the back burner a little bit?
I don't know. I guess it will depend on how vindictive the CBS network is in general. And I don't know the language of the contract to say that, it's got to be a 2:30, it's got to be a prime time. Or if you have game A, that's a SEC game, that's a little bit worse than the Big Ten game, which one do you advertise more that week? Which one do you promote more during the NFL games on Sunday leading up to the following Saturday?
Yeah.
Which one do you? I think internally we all think that what they're going to do is they're going to go with the Big Ten game because maybe they're a little sour at the SEC for not being able to negotiate the same kind of deal. It'll be really interesting because, and I know a lot of this is like, okay, well, they're still airing the games. What does it matter? But it does change the way that you view college. It does change the kind of mindset that you've always come through with each and every week. You're almost programmed to, hey, this time, this channel, and you're going to have to adjust that. And it depends on what these networks will do. I do believe that the CBS will hold favor a little bit more with the Big Ten than they will with the SEC next year. But I do think they'll be professional partners in the last year of the deal.
Yeah, for sure. So big deal out of the Big Ten. And, CBS, the iconic theme music of CBS.
Right.
They've already posted, CBS Sports has already posted a video with Big Ten highlights behind that iconic music.
Yeah.
That'll pump you up for any college football game.
It certainly will. It's one of the best ones as far as theme music goes. I've always loved the NBA on NBC back in the day. I love the Olympic theme back in the day. At CBS, their intro to get you ready for a college football game is up there with one of the best of all. And to see that juxtaposed with Big Ten highlights. You're just not used to seeing it. You know, Rutgers and Penn State and whatnot, Indiana and Purdue. You're used to seeing that with Alabama and LSU and Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and the like. It'll be a little bit of a different viewing experience, I think, for everybody. But with the way that they're rolling this thing out, I think I think, in my opinion, if you are the Big Ten, you did this perfectly. You did this on the heels of the SEC's move, but then you're also able to still keep what you're trying to do, keeping your name in the college football world. Because they do the broadcast so well, they're keeping their name in that world. They're just doing it with a different conference, but they're not going from the SEC to maybe the Pac-10 or Pac-12, whatever it is. They might be down to 10 teams before it's all said and done. They're doing this with the other power player. If you're looking at college football right now, and it will be in the next 2 years, it looks like there's 2 power players with 16 members, the Big Ten and the SEC. They're just shifting their focus from one to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So big deal out of the Big Ten as far as media rights. And, hey, the landscape of college football is constantly changing, and this is a big part of that.
Exactly. And I'll give 2 figures that show you the reasons why the USC and UCLA said, you know what, yeah, we'll join the same conference as Penn State, and we'll take our student athletes from Los Angeles, from Bel Air in UCLA's case, all the way out to Rutgers, which is basically in New Jersey. The reason why they did that, the figure that the commissioner put out of the Big Ten, $80 to $100 million for each of the 16 schools annually.
Wow.
80 to 100 million, which I know is a big gap between those two. And as you said, the big money won't come in until year 3 of this deal. But that's the reason why, number one, it was such an easy decision for UCLA and USC to go. But also, I think the ends justify the means in both their situations.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of money being thrown around there. Going to switch gears to high school football coming up next. Ron Belaskowitz from the Sand Mountain Reporter is going to join us. It is opening day of high school football. We'll dive into that coming up next.
Being an Army Ranger is
We are back on WKXX Live here on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani alongside with you here on this opening day of high school football here on this Thursday afternoon. We're going to go to the All-American HVAC Service hotline now, and that is where Ron Belaskowitz is joining us from the Sand Mountain Reporter. Ron, appreciate your time this afternoon.
Absolutely. Glad to be here and excited for another season of high school football to kick off tonight. A lot of interesting things happening up this way in Sand Mountain, and like I say, just excited for another season to be here finally.
Absolutely. There's been a lot leading up to it. It's time to kick it off. You've got a couple of games going on in your area tonight. I want to start, though, with Arab and Albertville kicking off tonight, year 2 for Chip English. He gets this game at home tonight. What do we know about these two teams? Big Marshall County matchup here.
This should be an interesting one tonight. Albertville out for a little bit of revenge after Arab kind of took it to them last year to the tune of 35-0, but a lot of talent back on Albertville's team, a lot of young talent that's back, including Andy Howard, who was an all-county selection as quarterback last year. I think had over 2,000 yards of total offense and really seemed to find his stride as he went along. He's got a lot of help back at receivers and a beefed-up offensive line this year. From talking with Coach English, I think he said everybody on the starting 5 on the offensive line that'll start the season is over 260 pounds. So a lot to look for from Albertville this year, and should be an interesting matchup in their youth going against an Arab team that, even with graduating their starting quarterback from last year and a handful of guys from their backfield, has 20 seniors on this season's team as they drop back to 5A. So it's kind of a youth versus experience matchup tonight at Albertville, which should be an interesting one. And like I say, Albertville hoping for a little bit better showing than last year, how it went, and played a jamboree down at Oak Mountain on this past Friday to hopefully knock off the rust. But yeah, I'll be at this one tonight, and like I say, just a really interesting matchup and two teams that I think we'll learn a lot about both of them tonight based on what happens.
Hey, Gerhard here. One of the games that also features another team that seems stacked and seems deep as you look at them from the outside. You had a great report and a preview of all these games. The other game tonight in the area with Geraldine on the road in Etowah County against Coosa Christian. It looks like both programs seem to be trending in the right direction, and this one seems like a really interesting one as well.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, like you mentioned, Coosa on the rise down there. Don't know a whole lot about them, but, from doing a little bit of research on them, it seems like you say, like a team on the rise, but it should be a really, really good test for Geraldine, who I will say outside of Fife is my pick to make a deep run this year up in this area. They return about 40 of 45 guys off of last season's roster and had a couple of guys transfer in, and they have Jackson Colvin back at quarterback, who was the DeKalb County MVP last year, and helping them go 7-4 a year ago and make their 15th straight playoff appearance. And Coach Davis up there has really got the guys bought in, and another year of experience and size, and they have the whole offensive and defensive backfield back up there. It's a really, really talented Geraldine team. If I was picking tonight, I would pick Geraldine to win that game against Coosa. And like I say, Geraldine is a team that I would have my eye on to make a deep run this year, even in a loaded 3A Region 6 that they'll be in this year.
Absolutely. And talking Geraldine, you mentioned Coach Michael Davis. This is going into year number 2 for him. Just, kind of observing him last year and then hearing him at Media Day and stuff. He sounds like the right guy for this program. He's got them moving in the right direction, but he brings a lot of energy, I think, to this Geraldine program.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big thing is he's a Geraldine grad. He played there and was a real standout running back for them. And all of the coaches on the staff are Geraldine guys as well. And so it's a group that is really, really bought in. And as he's constantly said and talking with them, they bleed purple up there on the staff, and they're wanting to do what's best, not just for the football team, but for the school as a whole. And like we say, 40 of 45 guys back. And he talked about in the season preview that we did for them this year, talking about it, just their level of understanding of what he expects out of them on and off the field has just grown tremendously from year 1 to year 2. And so he's excited about what they bring back this season.
For sure. Are there a handful of teams, and it looks like Geraldine might be one of those teams, that you expect to have a solid year this year, or some of the teams that might have flown under the radar last year that are expected to have a really solid season this year. Who are we to keep an eye out for over there in the Sand Mountain area?
Well, we have Gunnersville, who's ranked in the top 10 of the 5A poll. They're kind of a wild card, I think, a little bit this year because they have 7 new starters on both sides of the ball. Boaz is, I think, a really interesting one because they're extremely deep on the defensive front this year. Coach Sullivan's mentioned that they can go 10 guys deep on the defensive line and then another 7 or 8 guys at linebacker. So it's the deepest group he's had there. They're sort of like, some of the other teams in the area. They're young on offense, so if they can figure that out, they'll be in a really good spot. But one that I don't think people are talking about enough, and I think can challenge for that second playoff spot in 5A, is the Douglas Eagles. They have 10 starters back on both sides of the ball this year, and Coach Lyles is really excited just about the growth that they've had. He's had steady progression, getting them into the playoffs last year for the first time since 1998. And like I say, when you have 10 starters back on both sides of the ball off a playoff team, I think that makes them a team that's going to be a really, really tough matchup for everybody whenever they face them this year. And that's the one that I think is flying a little bit under the radar because we talk about the Boaz, Gunnersville, and we mentioned Arab earlier too, dropping back into 5A, and Scottsboro as well. But Douglas is the one that I think can sneak up on some people this year.
We're talking with Ron Blaskovitz, Sand Mountain reporter, talking some Sand Mountain High School football. Another coach that is new is Radley Edwards, Crossville Lions head coach. They have got Eider on Saturday. What do we know about Crossville under new head coach Radley Edwards?
Well, Coach Edwards was brought in basically to try and give the program some stability. And going over, I think he's the 8th coach since their last playoff appearance in 2010 and their 3rd coach in 3 seasons. And it's a guy that both the players and the administration trust up there. He's been in the school system for 3 years as both an assistant coach, and he headed up their strength and conditioning department. And from, speaking with him and seeing him at media days and listening to the players, it really seems like they've bought in that this is the guy who's going to help settle Crossville down and hopefully get things back on track for them. They're another young team at Crossville, not so much in terms of not a lot of juniors and seniors, but just not a lot of football experience. So he's been working the hallways quite a bit up there to get some of those juniors and seniors who hadn't played before in the past, to get them out there so they have those bigger bodies on the team this year. And it'll be interesting to see how they do this year because he's kind of putting in an old school offense, is what he said, like a shotgun veer type of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works for them. And he said the players seem to like it and that it gets to spread the ball around a little bit more, but hopefully this is the base for Crossville building back up and getting back into being a contender like it had years past.
For sure. Speaking of new coaches, Sardis kind of in that same boat with Chris Stevenson. I got a chance to hear him at a media day not that long ago as well. What do you make of Sardis as they look to bounce back? It's a proud program, of course, but looking to bounce back after the last couple of years.
Sardis will be an interesting one because I know every school was hit hard by COVID, but Sardis was one that really it seemed to stall out their momentum. I believe they were a playoff team the year before COVID hit, and then COVID happened, and it was a team that was set to be a lot of freshmen and sophomores. And when they had an off season where you couldn't lift and couldn't get the team together, that made for a recipe for disaster, and it's kind of shown up on the field the last couple seasons, but it should be a little bit more of an experienced team, a lot of juniors and seniors on that roster, and I'm interested to see what Coach Stevenson brings out on offense. He describes what he's trying to do as complex, and he's a guy who's won before. He was a head coach down in Florida for a long stretch, and his words, not mine, he never had a losing season down there in Florida, and as we know how tough Florida high school football is, that's a pretty strong accomplishment, but a tough area for him to move into in that, but as we've seen across the board in Sardis athletics, they have great athletes there, and so it's just a matter of harnessing that and figuring it out, and that should be an interesting one on Friday night when they host DAR, and I'll be at that one as well for his debut.
Ron Blaskovitz of the Sand Mountain Reporter joining us, talking some high school football. Ron, it's here. You get to enjoy some high school football. Enjoy it tonight, tomorrow night, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it anytime.
Thanks, Ron. Ron Blaskovitz of the Sand Mountain Reporter joining us this afternoon. And should be always good football up on Sand Mountain area. And looks like it's going to be again.
Yeah, proud programs up there. And there's a lot of teams that, as Ron pointed out, like some teams have different measuring sticks going into the year. A team like Sardis, 1-9 last year, 0-10 the year of the pandemic. You knew that the last 2 years were going to be hard. New coach, new blood. What does he bring? That's one side of it. Then you have a team like Douglas. Douglas used to, I mean, let's just, keep it honest. Like Douglas was not very good for a very long time. And, going back into their history, they'd won 6 games in the 4 previous seasons. They went 3-7, 1-9, 1-9, and 0-10. That's 6 wins between the years of 2017 and 2020. Now they won 6 games last year, and they bring back like 20 guys from a team that went to the playoffs. And so I think Ron brings up a great point that they're set up. They might be looked at as a team. Oh, you're Douglas. You might have had a flash in the pan. No. He's saying look out for this team.
Yeah.
They are legitimate, and they're not what they have been in the previous years. And Coach Brandon Laus has done a great job there. So all the interesting dynamics of the way that teams are formed going into the year this year, I think it creates a lot of great storylines up there.
I think so too. It's going to be an exciting year of high school football, and we're excited to bring you some, and we'll get to more of that coming up tomorrow with some of our great high school football programming. We'll take a break right here, come back, and we've got a lot more to discuss. Deshaun Watson back in the news. We'll talk about him coming up next. We are back here on WKXX Live. Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani here with you. Our phone number is 256-413-1029. That is 256-413-1029. If you'd like to call in and be a part of the show today. Some NFL note to pass along as far as Deshaun Watson. He has the NFL and the NFL Players Association reached a settlement with what to do with Deshaun Watson.
Right.
His disciplinary matter there. And he will now serve an 11-game suspension without pay, as well as a $5 million fine. And he'll have some mandatory evaluation by behavioral experts.
Yeah, this is an interesting storyline, interesting development, because he's maintaining his innocence even after this. Even after the Players Association agreed to the 11 games. This is after Sue L. Robinson, the arbiter, the independent arbiter, came out and said 6 games, but she did that with the thought of basing it based on past precedent. So she did 6. The NFL wanted the whole season. They agreed on 11 games. And so that 11 games, $5 million fine. And as you mentioned, the undergoing evaluation and also following a suggested treatment program. Why would you agree to all this if you are still maintaining your innocence? I think he's just, whistling, past the graveyard on that one. But in my opinion, this one is about what I thought. When all this first came out, I said in the neighborhood of maybe 8 to 12 is what I thought the NFL would be okay with. Now they are trying to push for the whole season, and I don't mean to sound like I'm just side-eyeing this, but I thought that was mainly for optics. I think the NFL wanted to make it look like they were on this hardline stance of a year, knowing that they probably wouldn't get that from the arbiter, and the NFL Players Association would definitely not go for that as well, based on past precedent. So the 11-game suspension falls in the window of about what I thought, and the $5 million fine. So the Browns will have some decisions to make between now and then. Do they go get some other guy that can maybe be the bridge guy? Jimmy Garoppolo's out there. There's a few other guys out there, or they just stay on their own roster and go with a guy that's already on the roster as a backup.
Yeah, and so his suspension will take effect August 30th when the NFL teams cut down to 53 players on the roster. He'll be eligible to come back November 28th. And look who Cleveland just so happens to play the week he'll come back, and that is his old team, the Houston Texans.
And Chase, there's something, I'm not going all conspiracy theorist on this, but there is something a little odd about the way this 11-game suspension falls, because he comes back in week 13. There's a bye in there, obviously, and he comes back and he faces the Houston Texans. Meanwhile, today, actually, the Carolina Panthers put out the fact that Baker Mayfield will start start in week 1 again in their first game, and the team that the Carolina Panthers play in week 1, the Cleveland Browns, his old team. So Baker Mayfield will play his old team in Cleveland, and the new Cleveland quarterback will play his old team when he comes back from suspension against the Houston Texans. And you could do a bunch of nonsense and get caught up in the weeds on that. But it is interesting to see the way that it all shakes out, because, I mean, if you remember, and it's hard to kind of think before what happened with all this stuff with Deshaun Watson, with the sexual misconduct and all that with the massage therapist. But if you remember, right before the allegations came out from the almost or over now 24 women that have he's reached settlements with, and that have filed suit and then settled. If you remember, right before that, Deshaun Watson was demanding a trade from the Houston Texans elsewhere, and then of course that was in the news cycle for about a week or two, and then all this exploded. And it's just interesting to see how it's all shaken out, and I wonder for Cleveland what they do now that this matter seemingly is behind them, and they have now the disciplinary judgment now in place. Where do they go now?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to follow because obviously, a lot of people, including the NFL, wanted the whole season. They did not like the 6 games. Now we're at 11 games. And you know, things are going to happen. When you do something like he did, whether he says he's innocent, whether he did it or not. I mean, consequences are going to follow with that many suits in there. But he's still maintaining that innocence.
Yeah, he certainly is. I mean, he came out a little bit today after the initial ruling, not that long ago, and came out, spoke with reporters, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing what I'm reading from his quotes online, that he'll continue to stand on his innocence. He says, just because there's settlements and things like that happen doesn't mean a person is guilty for anything. I feel like a person has an opportunity to stand on his innocence and prove that. And we proved it from a legal side. We're just going to push forward as an individual and as a person. I'm paraphrasing. That's not a direct quote from Deshaun Watson on that. And it is interesting because he says that someday he wants to tell his side of the story. Of course, a lot of that's being caught up in all the legal side of things, and he wants to show and prove that he's innocent. I don't know if he's changing anybody's mind. He's not changing my mind unless I just see just some preponderance of evidence. And if the judge didn't see it and the NFL didn't see it, and the NFLPA came out and said, you know what, 11 games. They didn't stand on, hey, 0-0-0 because we don't believe you're innocent.
Yeah.
I don't think he's changing any minds with it, so I don't know why this narrative continues. But I think for him to just go away for a while, once August 30th comes around, I guess he'll play in some preseason games. That might be a little awkward, but go away after that, and then we'll see him again after, I think, November 28th.
Yeah, it's surprising that it's the 30th when when his suspension starts,
right?
Because like you said, he'll probably play in some preseason games.
Yeah, I mean he's eligible to, and I think the Cleveland Browns, I think if they're smart, they just keep him away. I don't know if they will, mainly because they might just be a little nervous that, hey, he'll be rusty when he comes back. And the way the NFL suspensions work is you can't even go to the facility. Like, you can go practice on your own somewhere, but you're not affiliated with the Cleveland Browns during your suspension. And keep in mind, he has to do all of the mandatory evaluations and meet with the behavioral experts and follow the treatment program to be reinstated. He's only eligible for reinstatement in the end of November. They still have to say, hey, have you done what you're supposed to do in that amount of time? And if you haven't, they can come back to the negotiating table and say, hey, month of October, you messed up, or whenever. And they want to extend that suspension throughout the whole year. So there's still a lot of things that he has to do to make sure that he's able to play.
Yeah, great point.
But yeah, it will be awkward, for him as the Browns continue to move forward. And they might want him out there just to, maybe get a few more reps with the receivers and whatnot. I just don't know how much that helps you from now to November. I just say just keep him away, keep him out of the light, and then try to move forward with your team, either by getting a free agent quarterback or by going with the guys on your roster.
Absolutely. And so we will follow with Deshaun Watson and see where this goes, and see if he will come back in late November. We got to jump to a break here because we're going to be talking about the Night of Fire drag race that's coming up this weekend there at the Alabama International Dragway in Steele. Jason Collins will join us to talk about that coming up next. We are back here on this Thursday afternoon. It is WKXX Live on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani here with you. And we are joined right now by Jason Collins from the Night of Fire drag race happening there at the Alabama International Dragway in Steele, coming up this Saturday. Gates open at 9 a.m., qualifying at 2. It's going to be a great weekend. Jason, really appreciate you coming on with us today.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate you having me.
So give us kind of a glimpse of what folks, they've been hearing the commercial here on this station. What can they expect this weekend there at the Alabama International Dragway with Night of Fire?
Honestly, this thing's been building up over and over through the past couple weeks. Even though we already had stuff booked in, we've added a lot of extra attractions. We've got Nitrous Pro Mods, looking at probably 12 to 14 of those. We got Blown Pro Mods. We've got 6 of those that are scheduled to be here. We've got a 36,000 horsepower jet truck, got 3 engines on it. We've got a fire-breathing, fire-eating woman that's going to be doing a fire show. I mean, this Night of Fire is turning into something awesome.
You've done a great job, Jason, on your social media platforms of letting people know the specific vehicles that are coming out. I saw where Mr. 5-Speed, the Punisher, Batman, all out there. For those maybe not plugged in all through about drag racing in general, what are some of the main differences that they'll see as far as the car's performances and some of the things that they'll see out there with these individual great machines?
Well, I mean, all these cars are going to be cars that make roughly, we'll call it 3,000 to 5,000 horsepower. You've got blower cars. Obviously, they're really loud. And, they're capable of running 360s in the eighth of a mile at over 200 miles an hour. Then you've got the nitrous cars. They're more like the fire breathers. In other words, when they go down the track, they got flames, out the headers. You're going to probably see some 370s, 380s in those. And they'll also run right in the 200-mile-per-hour range. It's just 2 ways of trying to make power.
It's really interesting. And you mentioned the 36,000 horsepower 3-engine jet truck. How does that work? And how what will people be seeing when they see that?
Yeah, those things, they actually have a huge fire show out of them when they, hit the afterburners and everything. And like on the commercial where it says it'll huff and puff and blow your tower down. I mean, we actually had, the last time we had one of these type vehicles here, it actually blowed one of the windows out of the tower. It busted the window. But they're just huge crowd favorite here. I mean, if you've never seen anything like that, it's definitely something you want to put on your bucket list. I mean, I've been racing all my life, and those things even excite me still.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've always found interesting about the racing community just in general, and obviously I'm sure that the drag racing community has the same thing, is that you have people from all walks of life and people from all places around that are interested, that come to these big time events here at Night of Fire. Where do people come from in order to come to this big event that are a big part plugged into the net drag racing community?
Sure. As far as the racers, I mean, the racers themselves, they're all coming from probably all over the Southeast. I mean, you'll have cars from Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, and of course here in Alabama too. And as far as the spectators, I mean, I'm sure we'll have people from over in Georgia and Chattanooga area and things of that nature come down. But, I mean, this show is, it's set up for an entertainment deal. I mean, it's all, based around fast cars. And, I mean, for the average person, they may not know, how fast these cars actually are. But, I mean, the best way for me to explain it to somebody that does not, follow drag racing I mean, 0 to 200 miles an hour in 3.6 seconds. I mean, just
Wow.
let that soak in. I mean, that's crazy.
That is. We're talking with Jason Collins from Night of Fire. That's happening this weekend there at the Alabama International Dragway in Steele. Give us the info as far as tickets, how people can get those, and what the day will look like on Saturday.
Well, we're going to start on Friday night. There's going to be a lot of, I'm sure, pro mod testing and some other racing on Friday night. Then on Saturday, we'll open up early, probably in 9 to 10 a.m. Now, this show will probably go till midnight. So, when we get started at, say, around 11, 12 o'clock, it's going to be drag racing from then till midnight. We'll be we've got lots of classes, and it'll just be constantly something going down the racetrack. And it's definitely something that's people want to see. And, as usual, it seems like a lot of people, they'll kind of start filing in, mid-afternoon, because obviously the Night of Fire, the jet truck, and all that, we're going to run them at dusky dark, as soon as you get the full effect.
For sure. And you also mentioned the performer that will that'll keep that fire theme going in the fire eater, I think is how you described her. For those that are unfamiliar with that performance, it seems like, hey, it just ties right into the fire theme of what the cars are able to do, and then the magical performances that they'll be able to put on as well.
Right. And what we're going to do on that is, obviously drag racing, sometimes you have oil spills or crashes or whatever.
Sure.
So, if something like that happens once the sun goes down, then we would have her do her performance while we're cleaning up. Hopefully that won't happen, but if it does, then she'll perform, right in there with the jet truck.
Interesting stuff. It's going to be a great weekend there at the Alabama International Dragway in Steele for Night of Fire. Jason Collins talking with us. Jason, really appreciate you hopping on with us this afternoon, and hope you have a great weekend there and a great turnout there for Night of Fire.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all helping us promote it. And like I say, if you haven't been to one of these Nights of Fire, it is a great show.
Well, looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Jason. Jason Collins with the Night of Fire. Sounds like if you're into the drag racing scene, that's the place to be.
It certainly is. And I think even if you're just a casual fan of
like
fast,
fire.
Right, you like fire, you like fast cars, you just like to see an impressive showing of speed and power, all kind of bottled into one area. The track out there will be the place to be, and they've done, like I said, they've done a great job on their social media platforms being able to promote it. If you go to Facebook, you'll see it on the Alabama International Dragway, and you'll see the cars that are out there. You will also see all the information that we laid out and Jason laid out as well, being able to find where you get tickets, the individual classes, stuff about the pro mods and the jet blower cars, the jet trucks. You'll see all of that information right on there. He did a great job explaining it for maybe the casual fan, but definitely if you're a fan of drag racing, this is the place to be. Both Friday and Saturday, just an excellent spectator event. On television, it looks incredible, but when you really think about 0 to 200 in 2.5 seconds. Well, our metric is always 0 to 60. Think you just double it again. Like it's insane how fast these cars go in a very short amount of time.
You're right about that. So that'll be a great night. Again, that is in Steele, Alabama, at the Alabama International Dragway. Saturday, gates open at 9, qualifying at 2, and like you said, they'll be going all the way to midnight.
Right,
and a lot of the fire stuff coming that night. So exciting stuff there at the Alabama International Dragway. We'll grab a break here to end hour number 1. Glenn Gilbo will start off hour number 2 with us coming up next here on WKXX Live.
WKXX is live for the fastest 2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
and Gerhard Mathangani
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
for WKXX Live. These guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Hour number 2 here on this Thursday afternoon. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani alongside this afternoon. And we start off the hour by going to the All-American HVAC Service Hotline. Glenn Gilbo with Outkick.com is joining us. Glenn, how are you today?
Hello, good afternoon.
Great to have you on. Always great to talk with you. And want to dive into some LSU Tigers as news came out. Miles Brennan loses the job to Jaden Daniels there in the quarterback battle in Baton Rouge, and he's leaving college football. And as you've kind of been keeping up with LSU football, was this surprising? First of all, where they're at in the quarterback situation, but then Miles Brennan just turning around and stepping away from football.
Well, it didn't surprise me that he wasn't going to be the starter. I thought when they got Jaden Daniels last spring that he was probably going to be the starter. And Miles is not very mobile, and LSU has not had a good offensive line, and they're probably going to have an average one this season as well. So I think it behooves them to have a back who can move around a bit. And Miles just never really played much and had a lot of bad luck with injuries. So that didn't surprise me. But it did surprise me that he's not at least trying to transfer to a smaller school where he could get some seasoning, get some plays in, and then try for the NFL. So that kind of surprised me.
Absolutely. Glenn, how did this play out in the locker room, do you think, from what you've kind of gathered? Coach Brian Kelly, obviously there in his first year, his first offseason in putting this team together. Obviously, a coach with a lot of name recognition, but did this play out about the way that you thought it would, or is it a bit surprising?
Well, Miles Brennan, he's been at LSU a long time, but he was a 6-year senior, but he only played in 4 games in which he wasn't just mopping up for Joe Burrow or the starter. So it's not like he was an established leader of any kind. He was really an unknown commodity. So I don't think it really impacts the locker room at all. He hadn't really built up any credibility by playing a lot. So and everybody knew quarterback was going to be wide open, and it still is kind of. So it's the first year of a coach. There's a lot of question marks throughout the roster, and older guys tend to get pushed to the background when you have a new coach coming in and you're not expected to be a great team. So I think that's not a surprise part, and this team knows that it's definitely a transition year, another transition year.
We're talking with Glenn Gilbo, Outkick.com. He joins us on the All-American HVAC Service Hotline. When you look at this LSU Tiger team, are there any other kind of position battles going on right now that maybe folks are watching, LSU fans are watching as we approach September 4th when the Tigers take on Florida State?
Well, there's probably position battles everywhere, but wide receiver and defensive line. Wide receiver and defensive line are the only 2 real strengths of the team. Everything else is pretty young, inexperienced, unproven. So yeah, there's some position battles. Noah Kane is a transfer who's probably going to be the starting tailback with some competition from Armani Goodwin and John Emery, who was a 5-star but never has developed. And there's some competition at cornerback, but the main thing is how Jaden Daniels or Garrett Nussmeier develops with a talented group of receivers led by Keyshawn Boutte.
Absolutely. Glenn, one of the things that was noteworthy only in the sense that we're so used to seeing what I'm about to talk about, LSU being ranked, and the fact that they're not might be a small thing in the big picture. But how are LSU fans, in your opinion, handling what this first year will be? Do you sense that there's maybe some patience there? Do you sense that they're going to let Coach Kelly do his thing at the beginning? Well, obviously Nick Saban had a rough start here in the state of Alabama, and then everything kind of smoothed out. What do you gauge the temperature is in Baton Rouge as they look here into year one in the Brian Kelly era?
Well, I think the best thing for the LSU fan base was for LSU not to be ranked, because it makes people realize perhaps that they're not just going to be a great team like they were a couple of years ago, and so some lowered expectations give some breathing room for a new coach. I mean, LSU shouldn't have been ranked last year going into the season. They were ranked 16th, I think, going into the season last year after a 5-5 season with no real reason to be ranked. I think they got ranked because of their brand awareness, and people are kind of just used to them being good, and they just don't have the roster. And really haven't for 2 years to be ranked. I think they're good enough to maybe win 7 or 8 games, and it's better when fans kind of know that going into a season, so they're not as disappointed.
We're talking with Glenn Guilbeau, Outkick.com. Glenn, I want to get your kind of move over to the New Orleans Saints while we're talking football in the state of Louisiana. I know Mark Ingram back with the Saints. I know that's got to make Saints fans pretty happy to have Ingram back, right?
Well, I think it's more exciting for them to have Alvin Kamara back without a suspension. That's probably going to be carried over to next year. So that is really the bigger news, and of course the best news is getting Michael Thomas back at wide receiver. He's looked really good in practice. They were without him for 2 years. That's two of the most talented players at their position in all of the NFL right there, Kamara and Michael Thomas. And they really missed Thomas last year, and Jameis Winston was hurt most of last year. He's a little banged up right now, but he's supposed to be fine for the season. And they were really good. I mean, they had a decent season last year amid a lot of injuries, still finished 9-8. So with those players back, I mean, they look like contenders because the defense is really good. And, it's been a seamless transition to Dennis Allen. He kept most of the staff. So the Saints, unlike LSU, the Saints have the roster and the talent to really be major contenders this season.
Yeah, you touched on my next point was going to be about that defense, and obviously the line is good. It feels like the front seven is always solid there, and it seems like that is remained the same, and the secondary, especially at the corner position. What is it about this defense that you think that will give teams not only in the division, guys like Tom Brady and now Baker Mayfield out of Carolina, but also other teams on their schedule the most problems and give themselves a chance to win games with their offense?
Well, the defense carried them last year despite problems throughout the season at quarterback because of injuries. And, their rankings the last couple of years with Dennis Allen as their coordinator, and he's really going to kind of stay as the coordinator, as head coach. I mean, it's one of the best defenses in the league. All they needed was some fireworks on offense to make them go, and I think you're going to see that this season.
Glenn Guilbeau from Outkick.com joining us here on the All-American HVAC Service Hotline. Glenn, really appreciate you coming on with us today, and we'll do it again very soon, but thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn Guilbeau, Outkick.com, joining us here on WKXX Live as we'll see what the Saints can do this year. I mean, again, they're getting some guys back that they really needed.
They really did, and I think one of the big things going into this year was expectations. And I think that kind of it's big for both teams, LSU and New Orleans, but for different reasons. And I think he highlighted it with LSU not being ranked and whatnot. For the Saints, meanwhile, I think a lot of theirs is a quiet confidence. It's a quiet confidence that they can have a strong season. Now, given the fact that Jameis needs to stay healthy, if Mark Ingram can come and take some carries and take some pressure away from Alvin Kamara, Kamara's back again this year. You got Michael Thomas as your number one receiver. You add that defense into it. Coach Dennis Allen, as Glenn said, kept most of that defense steady there. And then you look in division. You don't know what's going on with Carolina. You don't know as far as their overall talent level. You expect them to take a dip. You're seeing what's happening right now in Tampa with an injury to their center. Both their guards, one retired, one now gone to the Bengals. You have some injuries at the wide receiver position. Mike Evans has been out. The defense, the back end of the defense has been solidified in Tampa, but that front seven, there's still some work to be done there. The Atlanta Falcons looks like they're rebuilding as well. So the Saints might see themselves, hey, we're in a primary position here to make a run for this division title and go into the playoffs, either as a division winner or as a wild card team. And so I think if you're a fan of football down there, while LSU might not give you, a national championship this year, the Saints will give you a whole lot of love on Sundays.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into some LSU football coming up next. We want to kind of break down their schedule, look at what's ahead for the LSU Tigers. We will do that as we continue here on WKXX Live. Welcome back in WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani here with you. 256-413-1029 is our phone number. 256-413-1029 will get you in to be a part of the show. And going to talk a little LSU Tigers now. We got a glimpse into the LSU program with Glenn Gilbo of Outkick.com last segment. But just kind of looking at their schedule and what's to come. Brian Kelly's first year as head coach. He's proven to be a good head coach. We've seen what he was able to do at Notre Dame, a couple of playoff appearances from Notre Dame. But this is new for him, being in the SEC,
right,
recruiting the SEC, fielding a team in the SEC. I think it's a fairly big jump to a program like LSU.
Yeah, I think the last time that they did this was probably with Coach Saban, but Coach Saban was leaving another Power 5 conference, and obviously Brian Kelly. You get him from a really good, they're independent, but they might as well be a Power 5 in Notre Dame. And in my opinion, this to me feels like, from Notre Dame's standpoint, is a sure thing. They just think, hey, we give this guy time, he can make this work, and we just need to give him that time. A lot like Glenn was talking about earlier, LSU fans are not very patient, though, and they want to make sure that they have a stable program very quickly. I do think that he will be able to deliver it. Now, it might get off to a bit of a wonky start early on, but he was able pretty early on to get Jaden Daniels in to transfer out of Arizona State. A guy that didn't play in the SEC. However, he does have Power 5 experience, and he can both run and throw, and it looks like LSU will really need that component in their offense because their offensive line is still rebuilding. Now, there's a lot of good talent in the trenches on the offensive side in Louisiana, in Texas, in Mississippi, and right here in the state of Alabama. There's talent everywhere. LSU is a place that recruits itself. Keep in mind, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron left there with championship rings, and so as the head coach, so it's a place that recruits talent. I think Brian Kelly just needs to get it all on that same page, and I think things like their quarterback leaving, things like Miles Brennan leaving, might be addition by subtraction, and being able to help your team and go with the guys that want to be there in Baton Rouge.
Absolutely. Looking at their schedule, they start off. It's an interesting game on September the 4th.
Right.
Florida State. This game is in New Orleans. Florida State, we know, is Mike Norvell is really trying to get that program kind of back going. It's been a while since they've really been relevant. LSU, again, a lot of unknowns. I think we can learn a lot about both of those teams on the 4th.
It's an interesting battle because it's two prideful programs that have championships, that have strong traditions, that have legacy coaches, Hall of Fame coaches. You go back to way back with Florida State, Bobby Bowden, obviously, followed by Jimbo Fisher, both bought a championship presence there. With LSU, we just mentioned the two coaches that did win a championship that got fired in Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. Nick Saban also won a championship there as well. You have, I think, two really great programs that have fallen on hard times. Now, both falls have not been the same. Florida State's fall, in my opinion, has been really, really steep compared to LSU's. But to me, Mike Norvell's in tough competition because I think a lot of people expect Clemson to have a really good year this year. There's a lot of talk about NC State as well in their conference. Some talk about North Carolina with Mac Brown doing a good job there. So I think that the conference has gotten a little better around Florida State. And then they need to obviously come back with a better season. They were, of course, last year. Last year I think that they just got off to such a terrible start. You play Notre Dame, you play Brian Kelly's team, which is interesting that they're playing Brian Kelly again to start this year. You play Brian Kelly's team at Notre Dame to an overtime game in game one, and then right after that, Jacksonville State beats you on a last second pass at Florida State. Those two games back to back, I think, set the stage for what we ended up seeing with their season as they kind of tumbled there towards the end. But I think both teams, we'll learn a lot with both FSU and LSU in that game.
Yeah, so Florida State's the first game for LSU on September 4th. They've got Southern at home following that. And then September 17th, they jump right into SEC play with Mississippi State, a team they beat by just 3 points last year, 28-25. I think Mississippi State will be much better offensively this year. So this could be another kind of toss-up game for LSU.
Yeah, this would be, I think, the first real true great test at the SEC. The way the SEC schedule lines up for them is really, I think, is really good for LSU, because you have 2 non-conference games before Mississippi State. And I think Mississippi State and LSU are battling for that same position there in the SEC West. I mean, there's a handful of teams, in my opinion. Obviously, you have Alabama and probably Texas A&M 1-2 in the division to start. And then 3, 4, 5, and 6 can all be filled with a handful of teams, in my opinion. I think those teams could rotate, whether it's Ole Miss, whether it's Mississippi State, LSU. Auburn will be in that mix as well. So I think that game initially will be good, really good for LSU and Mississippi State, a lot like the Florida State game. I think it will be good for both teams, because I think that they're kind of competing for that same area of the SEC West, not at the very top, but also not at the bottom.
Yeah, good point there. September 24th, they've got New Mexico at home. And then October 1st, this is a big game. They go to Auburn. Auburn beat them in Baton Rouge last year for the first time since like 99 or something. And then so LSU goes to Auburn again. So many questions with Auburn. It's hard to kind of know what to expect in this game.
Yeah, it really is. And keep in mind, just like with Auburn has a weird schedule in the fact that they have 5 straight home games. Well, Florida or LSU, they have that game, as you mentioned. It's a neutral site game in New Orleans to start out the season at against Florida State. So it's not a home game in Baton Rouge, but let's just call it a home game because it will be a pro LSU crowd over there in New Orleans. And then home games against Southern, Mississippi State, and New Mexico. Their first true road game is this Auburn game, going to the Tigers. And I know that if Auburn starts out the way they want to start out, because right before then they have nothing but home games. LSU is the 4th on that slate. It'll be another, in my opinion, great game for the Auburn Tigers as well. Yeah. And let's just say that going into that game, Auburn's undefeated, or maybe their 1 loss is to Penn State. Well, now you have a great situation set up for that matchup. If that matchup is a night game in Auburn, that's a really tough place for Brian Kelly to start off his first true road SEC game at Auburn. Of course, there's lots to play out before then, but I'm right there with you. I think that game could be dynamic once we get to it, depending on how both teams handle the early part of their schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking ahead to October 8th, again, I think this will be another good game. LSU hosts Tennessee.
Right.
Tennessee, a lot of folks are high on them. I think Tennessee's going to be pretty good this year. So they've got Tennessee. Then they go to Florida. They host Ole Miss. They host Alabama. And then go to Arkansas to wrap up the SEC schedule.
That's just a really daunting schedule at the middle part of their year. And if you look at it from a quarterback's perspective, obviously Auburn hasn't named their starting quarterback yet. It looks like it might be TJ Finley, a guy that's played a lot. But also, as we've talked about earlier, Justin Hokanson and others, that the Auburn job could still be open. So who knows who will be the Auburn quarterback going into that matchup with LSU. But then you take on another against Tennessee. You got Hendon Hooker, experienced quarterback, playing in that game on the road. You know he won't be rattled. Then against Florida with Anthony Richardson, another seasoned quarterback, ready to go. By that point of the season, Ole Miss, I'm pretty sure Lane Kiffin will have his hands all over their quarterback situation, knowing exactly what they're going to go up against. And I expect whether it's Jackson Dart or whoever it is that comes out of Ole Miss, that could be a quarterback that's confident at that point of the season. Then you got the Heisman Trophy winner, and then you got Arkansas. So you at that point of the season, starting with October 8th, you could go legitimately against 5 consecutive really strong quarterbacks in the SEC in a good, in my opinion, good SEC quarterback year. So that's a really tough stretch between Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Arkansas, the middle part of their season.
Yes, and they got UAB at home,
right?
And then they go to Texas A&M, of course, for that rivalry game. And always good football there you see with LSU, Texas A&M.
Yeah, that's always a fun one. It comes usually right as a lot of times it'll fall in that area after Black Friday or maybe before Black Friday. This year it's on Saturday the 26th, so it's going to be after Black Friday. But Texas A&M, a really strong team. I think by then we'll know who LSU is. I think by the middle of the year we'll know who they are. If they start to stumble, then that game could be a blowout. If they are viable, if they have some solid wins underneath their belt, if they're able to beat an Auburn, if they're able to beat a Tennessee or a Florida or go to Fayetteville and knock off Arkansas. Then that Texas A&M game at the end of the year could be a really fun one. Hey, Texas A&M at that point, let's just say they have 1 or 2 losses on the year. Let's say their 1 loss is to Alabama or whoever. Then, hey, Texas A&M is now playing that game, for a spot in Atlanta. So there's lots of dynamics being played out, I think, at the front part of LSU's schedule, but also in the back part of LSU's schedule as well, depending on how they handle the middle part of it.
Yeah, for sure. So LSU will get things going on September the 4th against Florida State. That's the Sunday night game of that opening weekend of college football week 1 there. We'll talk a little high school football on the other side. It is game day for high school football. The AHSA kickoff games begin tonight. We'll look at those and other games happening across the area tonight. We'll do that next as we continue here on WKXX Live.
Catering in Collinsville. You get $20 worth of great food for only $10. Get half-price coupons are the big deal while they last at WKXX.com.
The delicious locally grown vegetables are coming in at S&S Farms on Chandler Mountain. S&S owner Jeffrey Smith continues the generations of offering up the finest vegetables you'll find anywhere. Round and Roma tomatoes, also a good supply of squash, okra, cucumbers, and a variety of peppers, including bell pepper, hot and mild banana pepper, jalapeno, cowhorn, and more. That's S&S Farms. From I-59, take the Steel exit to Chandler Mountain Road. Find them on Facebook or call 256-538-3233.
Night of Fire returns to Alabama International Dragway this Saturday, featuring the 36,000 horsepower 3-engine jet truck, huffing and puffing to blow the tower down. Heads up, 3-second, 200-mile-per-hour nitrous and blower pro mods, plus our race classes. And kids will love the fire-eating, fire-breathing show by La Santa Domina. Night of Fire, Saturday, August 20th at Alabama International Dragway in Steele, Alabama. Qualifying Friday evening, Saturday gate opens at 9. Qualifying at 2, kids 10 and under free. Don't miss it.
Hey, brother. Saw you called.
John, I've been thinking about our days during the war, and
I'm on my way.
Thanks, man.
If you are a veteran struggling with depression, anxiety, or need someone to talk to, call 800-273-8255. Press 1. It's private and free 24/7. Call 800-273-8255 or visit vetsforhope.com. Sponsored by the Partners of Alabama's Challenge and the Alabama Broadcasters Association.
Home protection means feeling safe and secure. That's why the Alabama Electronic Security Board of Licensure created a special website where you can check to see if your home security company is licensed in our state. Check before you hire a new provider, and if they come door to door, never feel pressured. Check their license for your security at licensedsecurity.org. This message brought to you by the Alabama Electronic Security Board of Licensure and the Alabama Broadcasters Association.
Parents promise to always keep our kids safe. And now that all kids 6 months and older can get a COVID vaccine, we've got another way to keep that promise.
We can do this. Find vaccines near you at vaccines.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
WKXX, Fox Sports 102.9, your home for high school football. Hey, Fort Payne, we are your local sports station. Fox Sports 102.9 and 99.7.
Welcome back in WKXX Live. Jason Gerhard with you here on Fox Sports 102.9. Glad you're along with us today as it is opening day for the high school football season here in 2022. And always an exciting time. We've both of us have been covering high school football here in this area for a number of years and have seen so many good teams, so many good athletes come through Northeast Alabama.
Yeah, and this is always, in my opinion, a really fun time of year because you know the players that have done a lot and maybe in their freshman, sophomore, or junior year, and then they're about ready to explode going into their senior year. There's a lot of hype going into it, but then there's guys that make a name for themselves in the year, like in the year specifically. And so to me, it's always fun to be able to get to this point of the year, and then all the things that you try to project from before, some of those things are right, maybe even more right than you thought, and then a lot of those things are wrong. So to me, this always represents a really fun time of year for those of us that like to keep up with high school athletics.
Yeah, for sure. And so excited about high school football, and the AHSAA does the Kickoff Classic down in Montgomery. We talked yesterday, broke down that Helena versus Chelsea game that is happening tonight there in Montgomery. But tomorrow night is a top-tier matchup when you look at high school football in the state of Alabama. The Hoover Bucks, the Auburn Tigers. This is setting up to be a really good game to start this season off.
The AHSAA did a phenomenal job, I think, with both of these matchups. Number one, the intrigue with two teams, as you mentioned, very close to each other. Helena and Chelsea, 15 miles apart. Helena just started their football season, or their football schedules, back in 2014. Chelsea moves up now into the daunting region that Hoover's in. And then today you get the matchup, or tomorrow, sorry, you get the matchup between Hoover and Auburn. Hoover is one of those programs that is synonymous with high school football in the state of Alabama, largely due to what Coach Rush Probst did and what their previous head coach did in Josh Niblett, going there 14 years there, winning 171 games, multiple state championships, both in 6A and in 5A. They struggled late, not necessarily struggled. They still were a great program. They just struggled to get over the Thompson hump, and the Warriors have won the last three state championships there. So Hoover, a proud program, looking to get their edge and to get their edge back. Meanwhile, Auburn is being led by Coach Keith Etheridge, he's already carved out a Hall of Fame career at Leeds and then winning another state championship at Oxford High School. So I think an interesting dynamic really has come about with both these games. One in a great rivalry game between two teams on the come up, and the other is two of the top five teams who I expect to be top five now and top five towards the end of the season as well.
There you go. And so we played some audio from the coaches, Felina and Chelsea, yesterday. We've got some audio lined up from the coaches that spoke with AHSA Media Day. Coach Keith Etheridge of Auburn, Wade Waldrop of Hoover. This is both of those coaches kind of talking about playing in this game in the kickoff.
They're very well coached. I think defensively they're as well coached as anybody in the state of Alabama. They play very hard. They play great football. And, at the end of the night, it's going to come down to these guys making plays on both sides and us as coaches having them in position to make those plays. But it's a football game. I got to be a part of this game a few years ago at a previous school, and understanding the dynamic of how this all works, it's going to be better than it was for us the first time I got to do this. But it's a football game. We're going to go through warm-ups, we're going to put our pads on, we're going to go play, and I think Coach would probably agree the team that plays the cleanest, the best football is going to have the best opportunity to win. And I know our kids will be ready, and I'm sure their kids will be ready as well.
This is one of those games that you get to start off a season and get to see what you have, because you're playing such a great team in Hoover with great players, great coaches. They're historically one of the best teams in the state. When you talk about football in the state of Alabama, Hoover's one of the first names that comes up. So, we get an opportunity to start the year off and play a great team like Hoover, and we want to play them twice this year. Yeah. So hopefully we will be in there at the end too. It's like Coach said, Hoover's Hoover, and Auburn's Auburn. We're gonna get together. Our kids are going to compete, and after the game, we're going to shake hands and wish each other the best. And hopefully everybody stays healthy, and we move on to play region play. This is a great game for our kids. It's an exciting game. We get an opportunity to showcase our kids on TV, and it's just like I said, we feel blessed that the Alabama High School Athletic Association asked us to be in this game.
That was Hoover head coach Wade Waldrop, the second coach Keith Etheridge, head coach at Auburn. And you mentioned it, they mentioned it. Hoover, just one of the most storied programs in the state of Alabama. Rush Probst, Josh Niblett, now Wade Waldrop kind of stepping into that. But coaches know that when you play Hoover, it doesn't matter who you are. When you play Hoover, you're going to get a good game.
Yeah, there's so many athletic players in the Hoover area, and then this is before and after the induction of Spain Park, and so you have in that same space, that same little area of Jefferson and Shelby County, you have so many athletes, a lot of talent, and really good coaching down there. So a lot of parents who have maybe sons that are really athletic, they love sending their kids out there. They know that they're going to get great tutelage. And Hoover puts a lot of guys, both in college football and going to the next level into the NFL. There's a pipeline between Hoover and college football in general. They know that one of the best programs, so you'll have a chance to play for a state championship, whether it was 6A, now in 7A, and then you also have a chance to play college ball. There is really not much surprise why the Hoover mystique has been what it's been for a very long time. It really started in the early 2000s when they got it going. Before then, I know they had some success in the 70s and then as well as in the mid 80s. But when Coach Probst got there in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when they started their run, and they really haven't taken their foot off the gas pedal since then. They've had some other competition. Thompson's really come up as a key rival, but Hoover is one of those teams where they're kind of the one of the top echelon teams in Class 7A, and I don't see that changing anytime this year, even with a new coach.
Right, certainly agree with you there. Here's Auburn head coach Keith Etheridge talking on just playing that storied program in Hoover.
It gives you that extra edge, getting to start off with a team with that notoriety and that has so many great players. You have to be have such attention to detail because you just got to be perfect if you're going to play in those types of games, and you want to make sure that your kids are ready, and you want to make sure that you haven't missed anything to put them in a good situation where they have a chance to be in that game at the end.
Which I'm wondering when Josh left, you obviously know one of the biggest jobs in the state was open. Mm-hmm. You got them week one. What was going through your mind when Wade was hired, and what do you know about him as a coach?
I just know that Wade's one of the top coaches in the state of Alabama. He's done a great job everywhere he's been. And when Josh left, I knew they were going to hire a quality coach. Because like I said, I've known Andy for a long time, and he's going to go out and try to get the best. And I had. The expectation was to play against Hoover and play against one of the best teams in the state, and that changes nothing. They just got another great coach, and Wade's going to do a great job at Hoover, and we're excited to play against.
He's talking. That was Auburn head coach Keith Etheridge. He's talking about Wade Waldrop, Hoover head coach. When that job came open, when I saw Josh Niblett was going to head over to Georgia,
right.
First of all, really surprised by that, but then I got to thinking, well, who's going to take this job? Because they're going to go after the best of the best in high school football.
Right.
And, Wade Waldrop would maybe not have been a guy that we know here in this part of the state with him being up in Florence and other schools, but had to be highly respected for them to consider him for the job.
Yeah, when coaches start talking about him, they talk in really high regards. And I know press conferences only go a certain length as far as does that translate to being able to coach your guys up? Does that translate to wins on the field? And in his situation, I think that it will, because he's a really good coach. Like I said, I know that the press conferences don't say everything, but he's so good at the microphone, and it looks like he's got command of the team, and he also understands how huge this job is. Obviously, it's bigger than Florence, where he left. He was there for a year, made the playoffs last year in Class 7A in Florence. We know that the football up there is not as strong as it is in the middle part of the state, so to speak, in both the Birmingham area and then a little further south in the Montgomery area. But he had a successful run as the coach at Chelsea, another successful run as the coach at James Clements. But as you mentioned, a lot of people mainly down here don't know who he was as far as a household name, because they had Coach Probst, who was a household name, and even Coach Niblett, who had built up his time at Oxford High School before taking the Hoover job, who had been a household name or creeping up into that echelon of being that. So Wade Waldrop was a kind of a relative unknown to people who were not coaches. People who were coaches know how good he was, but everybody else, for the most part, did not. So he's now knows that he's on the big stage, and I think he kind of embraces that. I think he likes that, and he understands, that this is one of those top jobs, and Hoover is always going to be, in my opinion, a job that always will put pressure, always demands respect out of you. I always say, and always make sure that, hey, we are never going to be a program that has any maybe fallback years or rebuild years. They always want to just reload, and for the longest time they have done that, and they expect to once again be that team that does that. Yeah,
here is Coach Wade Waldrop talking on that pressure of coaching at a place like Hoover.
Everywhere you feel the pressure to win. I will say, these young men sitting over there, they know what the expectations and the standards are. And I think when you take a job and you go into a job, and I've been, fortunate enough to be at some really good places, some great communities. And I'm just going to say quickly, seeing the videos from the Chelsea pep rally that they had the other day, my family, that just meant a lot to us to see that, because that's a very special place. But a big part of a job is getting kids to believe that they can play at that level and do the things that we talk about doing as far as winning. Walking into this place, these kids have an understanding about what it takes. That part of the job is, it's not complete, but we're ahead of the game in that part of the job. So, the expectation, the standard has not changed. The head coach has changed. They've handled that change very well, and we're going to be the Bucks on Friday night. That's for
That was Wade Waldrop talking about the pressure of coaching at a place like Hoover, and I'm looking forward to seeing this game between Hoover and Auburn. I think it's a great start to the year.
I think it's going to be an excellent matchup. Obviously, with Auburn, you know what you're going to get with a Coach Keith Etheridge team. They're going to be big up front. They're led by Brandon Joyner, who's one of the top offensive linemen in the entire country, and obviously one of the best players here in the state of Alabama as well. And then you have a new coach with a new system bringing in his philosophies at Hoover. And both teams have aspirations to once again be playing in the final game, in the championship game. And you heard Coach Etheridge there making a little joke about it, saying, hey, I want this to be one of 2 times that we meet, meaning that Super 7 championship game coming up in December. But I think from an on-paper standpoint, from an on-field standpoint, the actual game, I think we're going to be in for a great game between these 2 teams. And I do expect for those that don't know that much about Hoover they had their eyes peeled out and watching those highlights and watching the game on the HSAA network and also WOTN. They'll have that coverage there. I think a lot of people will be watching that just to see, hey, what does this Hoover team look like, and what can we expect from the Bucks as they move forward? Of course, they're going to be athletic, but then everything else that comes with the Coach Wade Waldrop program, we will see that on display. And I think Coach Keith Etheridge, his teams will be what his teams have been since Leeds, Oxford, Auburn, athletic, fast. They'll play to their strengths, and I know they want to get off their season to a good note as well.
They sure do. That's going to be a great high school football game tomorrow night. You got Helena Chelsea tonight there in the Kickoff Classic. Also tonight, right here locally, Springville at Etowah. You got Geraldine at Coosa Christian. You got Arab at Albertville. Asheville is playing tonight against St. Clair County. So some really good local high school football as well.
Yeah, and I think when you come to this point of the season, Coach Waldrop talked about this a moment ago, where there are some places that you have to convince players, hey, we're taking that next step. There are some places where you're on the first rung of the building block. You're trying to build it. Gaston is a team that comes to mind. They're talking about building a program back from where they were. They don't want to be where they have been. They understand it. Coosa Christian, I've listening to some of their players saying the same thing. After some years of struggling, they want to get their mindset in a place where they want to take that next step. They don't want to be seen as losers. They want to be seen as winners. This season always brings that for both teams. Then you have teams like Piedmont and teams like Auburn and teams like Hoover. They expect themselves to be one of the best teams. Now they got to go prove it to themselves and go prove it to everybody else because they are the hunted, not the hunter. I think now both dynamics start to come to play here in the early part of the season. One of the things that I love when coaches talk about, and Coach Scott Martin, he said this when he was back at Ohatchee. Then he said it on the radio with us just last week, saying you can only lose and win one game at a time. No one game wins you a championship, and no one game loses you a championship. You got to go through the grind of these next 15 weeks. But what these first 2 weeks represent to me is the beginning of that grind where the hope is still there. The pride is still there. You've put all the work in the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks of your summer and your spring, and now it's time for it to all come to fruition.
That's right. It is here. So we're ready to get after it in some high school football. We'll grab a break here. We'll wrap up the show. Get you ready for Braves and Mets on the other side. It is WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9.
The Furniture
getting ready to wrap it up here on this Thursday afternoon. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani here with you. Braves-Mets Game 4. 2 big wins by the Braves. 9-7 win last night. It's been a lot of runs scored over the last few days. It all comes down to Game 4 tonight.
Exactly. And we have a situation, I think, that a lot of baseball fans really wanted to see here, where you have a team that's chasing in the Atlanta Braves, and they're doing, in my opinion, a phenomenal job of doing so. But now you're getting to the teeth of it to where you're getting the Mets' best. And I think that part of that came out yesterday. They jumped out on the Braves early, and then Scherzer was obviously great. And then you got DeGrom today, who's one of the best ever.
And we're going to jump to the phones really quick where Jeremy is joining us. How are you, Jeremy?
Man, look, I heard Ben Ingram talk about something that I heard him talk about the other day. He was talking about the production when split the lineup into third. You have 1 through 4, and then 5 through, the third, front, middle, and the end of the thing. And if you look at the line score last night, look at the box score, that 9-hole hitter and below from 6 on, 6, 7, 8, 9, there's where your production was last night. And I kind of got to thinking about that, kind of looking at it, he's right about that. And when I go back and you look at some of these games that the Braves lost that were close, were in that similar way where your front 4 or 5 didn't put any production in and got shut down. And it's just when they try to depend on it's a team effort, and you know what I mean. It's a full 9-guy effort with Atlanta. It seems like, and when the whole team's clicking, you go on you have a June like you had, or but looking at the way they played last night, man, with the Mets, if they're gonna go ahead and they're gonna win this, it's gonna be the last head-to-head that they have better be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right about the lineup. It's got to be working on all cylinders. All the pieces of that lineup have got to be working together. They're facing one of the best pitchers in baseball, I think, tonight in DeGrom, and we've seen what he's been able to do this year. Of course, Max Fried is on the mound for the Braves, so I think the Braves are looking pretty good as well. But with this lineup facing DeGrom, they've got to produce all the way through.
Well, and I think they can. I think against DeGrom, Scherzer's just, man, he's Scherzer.
Yeah,
I mean, but DeGrom, Atlanta has shown that they can take care of business against DeGrom, and hopefully tonight will be another one of those nights. Guys, y'all have a good one. Let's go for the win, the big W tonight. I'll talk to y'all later. Go Braves.
Go Braves. Thanks,
Braves.
Jeremy.
Yeah, and actually, as Jeremy was talking about that, I was crunching those numbers from last night. He's dead on. That 1 for 3 spot, Acuna, Swanson, Riley, 0 for 10. The middle 3 hitters between Olsen, Rosario, and Contreras, 3 for 11. And Contreras had those 3 hits. So if you just bump him down to that final spot there and just add him with the last 3 went 4 of 10 with Harris, Grissom, and Grossman. That's Harris and Grissom, 2 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
And Grossman. If you add in Contreras along with it, all 7 hits came from the last 4 hitters there. 7 of 31. As he mentioned, Scherzer is Scherzer. He has a phenomenal day. However, they've been able to get to DeGrom. Can 1 through 3 and 3 through 6 put up numbers similar to what 6 through 9 did yesterday? I think they'll be in good shape.
We hope so. You'll hear that game. 5:05 for the Ford Leadoff Show. 6:20 is the first pitch tonight. Braves-Mets Game 4. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And that is all the time we have for you today. We will be back with you from 2 to 3, 60 minutes, starting tomorrow, every Friday for an abbreviated edition of WKXX Live on a Football Friday. But have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The massive Twin City End of Summer Blowout Sign and Drive Sale is underway. End of Summer Blowout. At Twin City, drive for less. A lot less. Up to $4,000 over book value for you.